We talked about BDE with Dubon. Well, here's another big D. Yainer Diaz. Dana Brown said he wanted to see him more last week. He's seeing him more, and Diaz is delivering. Dusty is a made guy, but can Diaz hitting and producing at the plate, can that put pressure on Dusty to insert him into the lineup more?
Well, I thought it was interesting. I mean, I don't want to say a flat-out power struggle, but that Dana Brown, the first-time general manager, went public saying, yeah, I've talked with Dusty about giving Diaz more playing time. Dusty's ability to resist was reduced when Yordan went out, but Diaz should be in the lineup 3 days out of 4. I mean, he should be catching at least half the games. The damn near fetish with Maldonado, whose numbers across the board are terrible. The machete blade is dulled. He's not throwing out base stealers. Diaz, way better at it. Diaz, 0 pass balls. Maldi has 4. And frankly, Maldi has a couple more that were gifted to him, scored as wild pitches. We know offensively, Maldonado's a terrible player. Diaz isn't there yet as an established good player, but even struggling Yainer is better than Martin Maldonado. You also spot him occasionally for 36-year-old Jose Abreu. You know, that Abreu's on pace to play 160 games is just stupid. I mean, even if he was playing well, you know, he's at an age where you should spot him a day off more often than he's gotten so far this season. So throw Yainer in the deeper water and see to what extent he swims, because you see the ball jumps off his bat. I went and watched some AAA video. Right? He still needs to swing at fewer pitches, but let him feel his way along. 100% of the upside in performance at the catching position lies with Yainer Diaz relative to Maldonado, you know, with Corey Lee and all this at some point.
Yeah, I believe they won about 300 at-bats for Yainer, and they were only on pace for maybe around 220 until Dana Brown made those comments. Now we've seen an uptick. He has played in 5 of the last 8 games, which is a lot more than we're used to. He's played at DH. He's played at first base. He's played at catcher. So it's starting to happen here. And, I mean, we were talking about it last week that Hensley had more at-bats than Yainer did, and he hadn't even been in the big leagues for weeks. So finally Diaz getting a little more run, and it needs to happen. Maldonado just hitting 091 in his last 7 games. I mean, he's just giving you nothing up there. There's just too many holes in this lineup. They got to figure this out, and getting Maldi out of the lineup regularly would certainly help. But we know how Dusty is. I just don't see that happening.
Very few people like being told, do this, do that. I'm pretty sure 74-year-old finally World Series winning managers qualify on that list. But sometimes you just need to admit, all right, maybe I was a little slow in seeing the light or coming around on a particular subject. But that Maldonado started 45 of their first 63 games behind the plate, I'll drop that phrase, managerial malpractice, once more.
Yainer Diaz won't catch half the games because Christian Vasquez couldn't catch half the games when he was here, and Vasquez is a way better catcher. Maybe not as good of a bat, but as far as veteran catchers go, Christian Vasquez, I know I've mentioned Christian Vasquez probably more than some of the players on this roster, this podcast, but the Montero truthers were pointing at the splits between Maldi and Diaz as a reason for Montero's struggle, saying like, oh, well, you know, when Montero is blown up, it's when Diaz has been catching him. That's the value of Maldi. Well, now Montero has blown a game with Maldi behind the plate, so that should disseminate those arguments. But you're right. Dusty, to some extent, is a made guy because of his career in this league and because he finally has a World Series championship ring. But Jim Crane has, between the two guys, he's got, you know, this 1-year deal with Dusty Baker, and Dana Brown has a 5-year deal. And so the commitment long term is to Dana Brown. How much pressure should Dana be putting on Dusty in the lineups? And how do you do that when you have a guy like Dusty who is a made guy? How do you put influence for a guy who maybe, Charlie, to your point, maybe he just doesn't see, maybe he doesn't think he's wrong. It's like, oh, Diaz is just, you know, getting lucky or whatever the case is. That's my favorite part about baseball is when the results don't go the way you think, it's luck. It's either bad or good. How does Dana influence this situation when you guy who is so well liked and so much, he's as heralded as Dusty Baker is?
Yeah, it's a very good and interesting question, right? What's the gauge of velvet on the velvet hammer where you're saying, Dusty, when you're a rookie GM? I'd be curious if we had a sodium pentothal stock usable. Where's Joe Espada on this stuff? Very potentially the Astros manager in 2024. Let me just mention quickly, and I know there are those who think, hey, 26 years as a manager, Dusty's never been thought of as a strong tactician, but a great people person, handler of the clubhouse, a guy people like to play for, all of which has substantial value. But any idea from the Dusty flat-out bashers that, well, if they had a good manager, they'd be, 47-19 instead of 37-29. No. Hardly any managers have significant impact on the win-loss record. I mean, maybe a couple games better around the edges here or there. And people will bash Dusty when he makes a decision that works out. Are they lining up to give him credit? No, it's easy to see the sore thumb sticking out and whack at it when something does not work out. But if I were Dana Brown on and he did go to him and say, hey, you need to play him more. Dusty, with all due respect, and I appreciated his most elaborate defense, if you will, for why he was playing Maldonado so much. But one particular point that I thought, it was just ridiculous. I don't want to say insulting to smart fans or observers' intelligence, because if it really is what Dusty believes, the issue is, hey, Dusty, you're wrong. That with Hunter Brown, Maldonado caught Brown 5 of his last 6 starts. Part of Dusty's rationale is, well, what if Yainer gets hurt and Maldonado then has to start catching Hunter Brown all of a sudden? What? Maldonado's the 36-year-old guy, 37 in a couple of months, catching the bulk of the games. Why don't you turn it around and say, well, what if Maldonado goes down? Why hasn't Diaz had more reps with Javier and Fromber and anyone else on the staff? It was just a very silly point. By the way, over the first 6 starts where Yainer was Hunter Brown's catcher, Brown's ERA 2.81. Those starts with Maldonado behind the plate, 4.81. Not a critical mass of data, but certainly points that fly directly in the face of the point Dusty was trying to make.
Yeah, my deal was they just needed to get Yainer regular at bats. If he's considered your best hitting prospect, and you sent Corey Lee down to Sugarland because you didn't want him just sitting on the bench all the time. Well, you don't want Yainer sitting on the bench the whole time. If these guys are going to develop, they're not going to do it just watching. They have to play. And I mean, in the last 7 games, Yainer's hitting .417 and slugging .833, and you desperately need offense right now. So hopefully we don't have to talk about this much longer. I think Dusty got the memo. We're going to see Yainer more often than not.
Granting Dusty the very valid point that there's more to catching than how you hit. We all understand that. When you're talking about one of the very worst offensive producers in baseball in a lineup that has been scuffling, I mean, come on. And throw in the fact that catching Yoda being what he is and has all his skins on the wall, the Astros' earned run average of the season is lower when Yainer Diaz has been the catcher than when Maldonado has been the catcher. Diaz has thrown out about 1/3 of opposing base stealers. Maldi's at about 20%. I mentioned the passed ball numbers. And if you buy into the advanced metrics on pitch framing and stealing strikes, Maldonado's in the bottom 25% in that category this year. So what legs are you standing on with the 2023 Astros in this argument?
Well said, and we'll leave it there.
And that's the bottom line, because Stone Cold said so.
Another episode of Stone Cold Shows in the books. If you enjoyed the show, please be sure to give us a 5-star rating wherever you get your podcasts. Charlie, Josh, and I will catch you next week, but you don't have to wait that long to get your Houston Sports Fix. All you have to do is subscribe to Sports Map Houston on YouTube. And John Granado, Lance Zerline, and Josh Jordan will have you covered there. And remember, ESPN 97.5 and 92.5 FM has you covered on your radio dial in Houston. I want to thank Jack Brame for pushing the buttons behind the scenes, and thanks to everyone listening. And until next time, Go Stros.